Hello, good evening, friends. So today we are going to do a presentation on panel discussion on the labor analgesia, past, present, and future. So for today's our moderator is Dr. Poonam Godki. She is from Pune. Our panelists are Dr. Satish Gupta sir, Dr. Vinit Gupta sir, Dr. Dilip Singh Parmar, and Dr. Chintan Vyas. So I hand over to Dr. Poonam to start the discussion. Dr. Poonam, please.
Yes. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to yet another Facebook Live session by Taz. It is my immense pleasure to play the role of moderator for today's panel discussion amongst the eminent speakers, and the title for discussion is Labor Analgesia. Labor analgesia is generally taken as a didactic lecture, but we perpetually decided to take it as a panel discussion so as to make it more interesting and interactive for the live session. Catering the audience that we would be having today, which includes the PG residents as well as qualified personnel that would include those working in teaching hospital, in private hospitals and the freelancers, we have variety of topics to be discussed. And hence, if you find a particular question quite theoretical, remember that we have PG students over here who would be definitely benefited by the discussion. So I introduce to you the panel discussion, Labor Analgesia, the past, the present, and the future. Now, because going by the title, I have to speak something about the past, so I will be giving you a very brief history. As we all know, Sir James Young Simpson in 1847 introduced ether into obstetric practice. He administered ether for a parturient who suffered from rickets, who had a very severely deformed pelvis. She delivered normally and her labor was painless. However, labor analgesia gained its popularity in 1853 when John Snow administered chloroform to Queen Victoria for delivering her eighth and later the ninth child, Prince Leopold and Princess Beatrice, respectively. Nevertheless, labor analgesia was administered even before this incident to Fanny Longfellow and Emma Darwin in 1847. But given the popularity of Queen Victoria and the influence she had on the social media at that time, her case was reported everywhere. And that is how labor analgesia became an eminent entity in itself in anesthesia. Over the years, labor analgesia has crossed a long journey from the inhalational agent we saw in 1847 just now till today, where it is a comprehensive management. So I would like to pose the first question to Dr. Dilip Parmar. What are the various techniques for providing labor analgesia?
Uh, Good evening, friend. There are various methods of labor analgesia, non-pharmacological as well as pharmacological. Non-pharmacological are TENS, hydrotherapy, Swiss, that is intradermal water injection, acupuncture, hypnosis. While pharmacological are systemic opioid, inhalation analgesia, epidural analgesia, spinal opioids, CSE, and continuous spinal analgesia. Now we are going to talk about TENS. In a TENS, there is the application of low intensity, high frequency electrical impulse via surface electrode applied to the lower back. The mechanism of action of TENS is not well understood, but it is not effective. It is not that much of effective in reducing the labor pain. The mechanism of action must be the natural release of endorphins and enkephalins that will help to ease the labor pain. The second is hydrotherapy, in which the parturient is immersed, the lower abdomen portion is immersed deep enough to into the hot water. The temperature of the water would be 36 to 37.5 degree. It should not be hot, and the parturient should emerge into the water during labor pain, not during birth, because the kids don't know how to swim. He may inhale water. This is the intradermal water injection. It is also known as saline water injection, also known as intradermal bleeding, in which you have on it back there is a dimple at posterior superior iliac spine. You have to mark that posterior superior iliac spine 3 centimeter medial and 1 centimeter below. You have to another mark. So there are 4-point injection. Simultaneously, 2% injecting zero point 0.1 ml of normal saline with tuberculin syringe at 4 marks. The onset of action is 2 minutes and it lasts up to 2 hours. The result of a Swiss is comparable to Antonox, and the mechanism of action is diffuse noxious inhibition of PAN pathway. And the hypnosis. Now, over the centuries of decade evolution, man develop a skill that he can constant focus on a single thing, while woman develop a more and she can focus on a multitasking. A woman can cook a food, she can watch kids, she can balance your checkbook, and she can talk on the phone. So it is quite difficult to hypnotize a female, and a parturient who is in labor bell, I think it is almost impossible to hypnotize her. So it is not that much of effective. There is a limited studies available, and there is not a significant difference between hypnotized parturient and control group. So it is not that much of effective. It is just for study purpose. Next is acupuncture. In this acupuncturist puncture the specific point of a skin, and apply thumb with the pressure over specific point. It will help in cervical ripening and physiological induction of labor.
Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Dilip Parmar, for emphasizing upon the non-pharmacological technique. Of special interest was the sterile water injection, that is the Swiss technique. I would like to tell the audience that this particular technique is an adjunct to the main labor analgesia. However, it is most popular for relieving the backache that is associated with labor pains, which is most of the times not addressed by the other methods of analgesia. As we all know, regional blocks are the most popular kind of the technique for labor analgesia. And to actually use the regional blocks in a particular way, we have to know the labor pain pathways. We are not going to go into the detail of the stages of labor, but what is important here to understand is that the 3 stages of labor are not discrete. One stage is often overlapped by the onset of the next stage, and therefore the pain arising from one stage is superseded by the pain from the subsequent stage. And therefore, although the pain pathways may differ in individual stages, targeted pain relief is very important and difficult to tackle. Therefore, my next question is to Dr. Satish Phadke, sir. How and in what ways can the regional anesthesia techniques be employed for labor analgesia? Can you please enumerate them?
Good evening. As Poonam has rightly said, it is important to understand the innervation of the different parts of the genitourinary system, that is the uterus, cervix, and the surrounding structure. So in first stage of the labor, the segments which need to be blocked are from T10 to L1, and while in the second stage, the cervix and the surrounding tissue, perineum and vagina, they need a complete blockage of pain. So those segments are S2 to S4. So accordingly, different methods are available. Of course, the epidural is the gold standard of regional anesthesia. So in first stage, during the first stage, either epidural can be given, combined spinal epidural can be given, or a spinal can be used, while some other techniques which can be used theoretically are the paravertebral anesthesia, then sympathetic block, as well as the paracervical injections. During the second stage, for S2-3, one may opt for a saddle block of spinal, or a pudendal block or local infiltration by the surgeon suffices for the second stage. Of course, there are limitations, and spinal epidural are the best things which are useful for covering all the segments and by adjustment of different dosages.
Okay, sir.
And
so we all understand that lumbar epidural analgesia is now a standard technique, but there are several controversies surrounding the administration of central neuraxial block for labor analgesia. I remember during our residency when we used to go to the wards to take the consent for labor analgesia, we had to specifically mention this particular point where we used to talk to the patient and tell her that the chances of instrumental delivery or she undergoing a cesarean section is quite high. And after listening to this point, she would opt out of labor analgesia. Over the years, however, because of scientific advances and technical advances, such controversies are no more there, and we are now facing the facts. So I would like to request Dr. Vineet Gupta sir to kindly demystify the controversies surrounding central neuraxial block and labor analgesia.
Good evening, friends. There are many controversies, or you can say myths, which were there before, and they are, by the passing of time, we are coming out of these kind of myths. The first and foremost question, as Dr. Poonam rightly said, the first question patient usually asks, what is the chances of me being landing into the emergency cesarean section by particularly choosing this mode of labor analgesia? So their question usually is increased rate of operative and instrumental delivery. This is a big doubt in the mind of patient as well as the new people who are doctors who are about to start their career in the labor analgesia. So the Cochrane database systemic trials have emphasized that epidural analgesia had not statistically significant impact on the risk of cesarean section. So they have studied two things. One is whether these people land up into the emergency cesarean sections or instrumental deliveries. So this Cochrane database as well as two meta-analysis of randomized controlled trial, they come up with the inference that there is no difference between the two groups. The one group being given this chosen this labor epidural as a mode of labor analgesia, the other one as other mode of labor analgesia like intravenous analgesia or something like that. So both groups are equally potential. They have the equal potential for the landing into the cesarean sections. Yes, but for the instrumental delivery, it was in the previous era. The chances were instrumental delivery with the labor epidural were more. But by decreasing the doses in low dose epidurals, even the chances of instrumental delivery has come down to significantly nowadays. The second myth is timing to start the epidural early or late. So there was a time in 2000 when ACOG bring out a statement that the best time to start the epidural is when the cervical dilatation is 4 to 5 centimeters. But later on, Wong et al. In their landmark RCTO, which included 750 labor analgesia epidurals, they come out with a statement that they made two groups. One where they applied this labor epidural at the cervical dilatation of 2 centimeter. The other group, they gave this labor epidural at the cervical dilatation of 4 to 5 centimeter, and there was no difference found between these two groups. So later on, ACOG committee revised their statement, and they come up with the statement that maternal request is a sufficient indication for the pain relief in labor. So nowadays, the right time is whenever patient requires the pain relief, we used to apply this epidural. Then comes early or late pushing, whether to start pushing, to tell patient to push early or late. Yes, for this, passive descent should be encouraged along with the delayed and monitored pushing during the birth to safely and effectively increase the spontaneous vaginal birth. So the early pushing is not encouraged, late pushing is better. The pushing early or pushing late with epidural was a study called PEOPLE study, PEOPLE. This also supported the delayed pushing for a better outcome. Then third was whether to withhold the epidural top up during the second stage or not. In the RCTs of epidural discontinued late in labor, the reduction in the instrumental rate was not statistically different. But yes, the painful pain of this withholding the epidural was too much, without any added benefits. So this is also a myth. There is no need to withhold the epidural during the second stage of labor. And in fact, at our own practice, we are not stopping or withholding the epidural infusion. Then next is vaginal birth after cesarean and epidural. This is in fact a better option to put an epidural to a labor patient who has the previous cesarean section, because one is they can be more cooperative if they will be given a trial for the normal labor. A second thing, the same labor epidural can be used to convert into the cesarean labor cesarean the surgical analgesia if they are landed into the emergency cesarean section. Then epidural and breastfeeding, there was a lot of confusion and this myth about this one, and even most of the patients from the rural part of India, even nowadays they ask this question कि हम breastfeed करा पाएंगे कि नहीं, let down होगा कि नहीं होगा. But this is completely a myth, and we are giving epidurals without failure of letting down effect or withholding the breastfeeding. In fact, in our hospital, as soon as baby delivered, they are given to the neonatologist. Once they resuscitate, clean and does their complete job, the baby is directly handed over to the mother, even when the patient is being sutured for their episiotomies. So this is also a big myth. Then backache and epidural, there was no significant difference in the incidence of long-term back pain between women who have received epidural pain relief and women who have received other form of pain relief. So this is also a big myth. There is no direct relationship with epidural and back pain. In fact, a recorrection of the posture was found to be the main cause of back pain. And you have to teach your patient that once you are carrying a baby for the 9 months in your tummy, you take a corrective lordosis. And once your baby is out, your extensor muscle takes some time to come back into the normal position. And you have to come up with these things. So this is more of a physiological reconditioning of your back muscles. And it is the biggest, I think it is the biggest myth we were facing to convince the patient about that. Then maternal pyrexia and newborn. Epidural analgesia in non-obstetrical patient usually causes little bit of decrease in temperature because of peripheral vasodilatations. But surprisingly, this is completely reversed in obstetric population. In some of the patient, we have seen the patient have increased temperature, usually less than 1 degree centigrade, but there is a rise in temperature. But irrespective of the cause, if any rise in temperature is there, we have to treat it with the hydration and antipyretics. But this intrapartum pyrexia due to epidural dose does not warrant evaluation of the neonatal sepsis. So there is no worry about it. Then postdural puncture headache, yes, it happens. It's a reality. It's a reality with any spinal puncture, and it is more with the combined spinal epidural anesthesia or inadvertent dural puncture during conventional epidural injections. But because nowadays use of small bore atraumatic spinal needle reduce the incidence of postdural puncture headache to even less than 1% now. Then intrathecal, if there is a dural puncture by the epidural needle, it's advised to put this catheter inside the intrathecal space, and that will decrease the chances of PDPH. Then role of the intralipids, it's a savior for the obstetric anesthetist. This is a must drug on your emergency trolley, role of intralipid, because it is the best drug available to treat the local anesthetic toxicity, and it is the best drug to resuscitate a mother if she collapsed because of this toxicity. The availability is intralipid is available as 20% solution in 100 ml vial. The dose is bolus dose is 1.5 ml per kg in the first minute. So for around 60 kg patient, you can directly give one vial of 100 ml in first minute, and then you have to start the infusion of 0.25 ml per kg per minute for next 10 minutes. Watch that patient, keep on resuscitating the patient. If that 10 minutes is good enough, not good enough, you have to double the dose, like 0.5 ml per kg per minute for next 10 minutes. But you have to keep in mind that maximum dose of interlipid is 600 ml in 30 minutes. Then infective complications, yes, it can happen, but the chances are, as it in the non-obstetric population, you are giving regional anesthesia, and being an anesthetist, you know how many cases you have seen as an infective complication by giving spinal or epidural anesthesia in non-obstetric population. So this is a big myth connected with the obstetric population. Then insertion of epidural catheter, how long it should be inside? The ideal length is 3 centimeter, but more than 5 centimeter is not at all advisable at all. One thing is it can cause knotting, the other thing is it can be looping. And if it is knotted or before removal, if you think that it is torn, the best way to diagnose is with the CT scan. So that's it about myths and
Thank you so much, sir, for clearing all the controversies surrounding central neuraxial block. So yes, lumbar epidural analgesia is the gold standard for labor analgesia. So the next question is to Dr. Chintan Vyas. Classical lumbar epidural analgesia, why is it the preferred modality? Also kindly discuss a typical LEA, that is lumbar epidural analgesia performance, please.
Hi, good evening. As already said by Madam, that lumbar epidural analgesia is the preferred and gold standard of the providing labor analgesia. Just because it is very easy and it is convenient to almost all anesthesiologists, we are putting it day in day out. It is in the business area of the patient, saying that because it caters to the both lumbar and sacral area, which is in the second stage of labor is required, and it is also a time tested method. Almost centuries have been done in this method, so it is the preferred and most easiest way. Now when to initiate the epidural, as sir has already said, ideally it was first said that it is to be done at 4 to 5 centimeters of cervical dilatation, but nowadays it is said that it is on demand of obstetrician and patient. Any time you can give you can insert the epidural catheter. Ideally, it should be in the second stage starting. There is a best result that I have seen practically. Sometimes you are called very late and it is done a rescue epidural sort of things. Now you should also know that when not to put the epidural. It should not be put in any SOL, raised as IC intracranial pressure conditions. Also should not be given in local sepsis, coagulopathy, or maternal hypovolemia, hypotension, or outright patient refusal, or patient is dicey that I want or I don't want. Proper counseling should be there. Also, any surgical intervention in that can be a difficult epidural, so not advisable. It is not a absolute contraindication. Now the technique is same for almost all lumbar epidurals, but a bit of variation in labor patient. Positioning is either you can give in seating or lateral. I prefer in seating. Site can be in L3-4 or 4-5. That is almost you can with 3 centimeter catheter you can reach all dermatomes. But ideally, best visible space in lumbar region can be better and effective. Now it is individual choice how they can do number epidural confirmation by LOR to air or LOR to saline, or hanging drop method, or combined method. Now there is some controversy that test tube should be done or not. It is ideally for ruling out intrathecal or intravascular placement, but nowadays it is omitted. Now I will briefly describe my method. I will prefer patient in sitting position. I will attach monitors and give start IV fluid, a bit loading of fluid, and I will visualize the spine and do it in the base lumbar space visible to me. I will prepare the parts and drape, and then there is my method of combined method, where I am calling it as a triple check method. In that, I will first attach the LOR sealing to the air, to the epidural needle, and see for the initial resistance. Then I will detach the sealing, and then put a drop of saline, hanging drop that is, and then advance the needle looking for the change in resistance, and simultaneously drop being sucking. At that point, I will reattach the LOR sealing and check for the loss of resistance to air. Most of the time both things happen, so it is a confirmatory. Then I will put a 0.5 ml distilled water inside. That will produce a severe back pain. That is again a one confirmatory method of so that you don't need any test dose afterwards to confirm that you have been in a right place. Now insert the catheter after all this triple check method. Catheter, I will put it in 3 centimeter, and then I will lower the catheter to see whether any blood or CSF is coming. I will take my time. I will not be in a hurry only. Many times what happens is you are in a hurry and you messed up everything. You take some few half a minute or 1 minute and see if it is there is blood or CSF in that. So there is no need of test dose. Then I will attach the injection port hub and give bolus in the sitting position itself. What it does is that then sacral area is all filled up and there is no sacral sparing. So I will be ensuring almost everything that my epidural is safe and effective. Now for the maintenance, there is you should know the concept of uh, one concept in epidural liver anesthesia is MLEC and MLEV. That is maximum LA concentration required to achieve the analgesia without motor effect. Now for drugs we are using bupivacaine and levobupivacaine or ropivacaine, lignocaine. For bupivacaine, levobupivacaine, it is 0.0625% to 0.25%. The dose can be varied for between parturient to parturient. For ropin, it is 0.1 to 0.2%, and lignocaine is 0.5 to 1%. It may or may not be with additives like opioids or alpha-2 agonists. The MLEV is a maximum LA volume required for the desired effect. That is typically a 3 ml per segment. So you need 6 segment block, ideally lumbars, lower lumbars and sacral. So 6 or 7 segments, you ideally require about 10 to 20 ml of initial bolus dose. After that, you are giving a maintenance. So for maintenance, there are 3 methods. Either you can give a infusion by a pump, or give intermittent bolus every few time. Every hourly is a preferred method. I do it every few minutes, like 3 ml every 15 minutes also. And I find it very suitable in private practice where there is only one patient and one sister to look after, and there is it is a VIP treatment to patient actually, that you are giving every 3 minutes a 15 minute 3 ml injection. That I have also done. There is also a method of PCA pump is there where patient can choose her dose, but there is a lock-in period of some minutes, like 15 minutes on top of basal infusion. So all these things can be done for the maintaining of the epidural. Now, you should also know the complication and side effects of putting the lumbar epidural. It is actually inadequate or patchy effect, high level. If dura is punctured, there is chance of PDPH. All this has been seen by me personally over the years. Hypotension is also there, but with diluted solutions, it is, and giving very slowly, you can avoid with better loading. There is nausea and prurite is seen, especially if opioids is added to the LA. There is also a possibility of unrecognized lumbar spread. I have seen one incident where the sister gave bolus, and there was sudden loss of phonation. So then I could realize that it was a intrathecal placement actually. So it happens. There is also a chance of LA toxicity, as sir has rightly said that you need intralibit inside the your liver analgesia trolley. Also, we have seen delayed and prolonged motor palsy. Especially, it is a problem with infusion and use of opioids. I don't prefer, that's why, and I have abandoned almost infusion technique for that matter. Infection and hematoma is also a problem, and sometimes you can see, but I have not seen any alarming things. And if you are reckless enough and ignorant enough, you can produce serious complication like coda equina too. But being vigilant is a good thing, and you can address it quite well. That's it about the lumbar epidural, I think. Over to you, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Chintan Vyas, for the elaborative talk on lumbar epidural analgesia. As he mentioned that he prefers an intermittent bolus technique. I would like to ask Dr. Dilip Parmar, can you please compare and contrast the infusion versus intermittent bolus technique for lumbar epidural analgesia, please?
We are going to discuss about intermittent bolus and the continuous epidural infusion. That this is the one study that published recently on the Indian Journal of Anesthesia and Critical Care, dated on 29 March 2019, before the lockdown started. So, in this study, there are two groups. Group A received intermittent bolus, while Group B receiving continuous epidural infusion of the 0.0625 percentage enavin and 1 microgram per ml fentanyl. I am just going to show the result of this study. See, in a Group A, the consumption of bupivacaine as well as fentanyl is very less as compared to a group where continuous infusion is given. So the drug requirement is reduced in intermittent bolus compared to continuous infusion, and it is statistically significant. Next. Now, when you see there is a rescue bolus requirement for the breakthrough pain. When you see this chart, in a Group A, initially in the first hour of the liver epidural analgesia, there is a requirement of rescue bolus for breakthrough pain. But when you on the second, third, and fourth hour of labor analgesia or during labor, there is a less requirement of rescue bolus in a Group A, while in a group B who received a continuous epidural infusion, there is a higher requirement of bolus for breakthrough pain. When you compare the Apgar score at the end of 1 minute and at the end of 5 minutes, it is I think it is equal in both the group. There is not a statistically significant difference between Apgar score in group A or group B. Now we are comparing duration of labor in these two groups. When you see first stage and second stage, there is a significant decrease in the duration of the labor, while the third stage, there is a result is almost equal. So we can say that intermittent bolus reduces the duration of the labor, while continuous infusion, there is a higher chances of increased duration of the labor, and there are chances of instrumental delivery, or there are chances of forced delivery. Now when you see the visual numerical rate scale in a group A and group B, during first hour there is not a statistically significant difference between both the group, but when you look later on, there is a blue one is a group one where there is a less score, while in a group B there is a higher score. So it is assumed that when you are injecting large volume of LA in intermittent bolus, so there is a large volume when injecting with a high pressure, there is a uniform spread of local anesthetics into the epidural space, and there is a much more effective blockade as compared to continuous infusion. And this there is another theory, there is a no distal flow in a continuous infusion. There is a from a distal hole there is a no continuous flow in a continuous infusion, while in a due to high pressure in intermittent bolus, due to high pressure there is a flow from all the three holes of the epidural, and there is a disbursement of drug into the epidural space is equal and uniform. So this might be the reason for the effective blockade in a continuous intermittent bolus injection. So we can say there are various studies, there are various another drug also studied, ropivacaine and fentanyl, for continuous and intermittent bolus, but the result is same, that intermittent bolus in intermittent bolus technique there is a less consumption of drugs, and it's a very effective method for epidural drug delivery. So we can say that intermittent bolus is better than continuous infusion. This is a journal where this study has been published. One can easily access it in Google. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Dilip, for the elaboration. What I would like to emphasize over here is, be it intermittent bolus or a continuous infusion, you have to be very careful of the drug that you are actually aspirating to inject. Be careful that it is the correct drug to be administered, because LASA errors, that is look-alike sound alike errors, are very common in epidural analgesia. So you have to be very careful. Now, what is the philosophy of behind administering lumbar epidural analgesia? For me, it is acceptable analgesia. Unlike in cases where you administer in non-parturients, where you expect a complete loss or absence of sensation, it needn't be the same for a labor analgesia. So if the patient is getting pain relief, that should be accepted. And the main prerequisite for this is that your catheter should be in the correct place. Conventionally, this is done by the epidural test dose. I would like to ask Dr. Satish Phadke sir, is the epidural test dose any different in labor analgesia, and what are the changing trends?
This is a very important question, an important point one must understand while administering epidural labor analgesia. Before answering this question, I would like to add 2 points regarding the earlier speakers. First thing, in the myths and this thing probably will come in the next topic. Patient generally asks, how can I deliver when you are giving anesthesia? There you have to convince, and at the same time you need to convince the gynecologist also that our epidural is selective analgesia, that because it blocks only the pain carrying pathways and your motor sensation as well as the sensory nerves, they remain intact. Even many gynecologists don't know this, so they are not for labor analgesia. The first thing of practicing epidural labor analgesia is convincing the senior gynecologists who are not accustomed to this thing. That was the point. So you need to counsel the patient and her husband when you administer labor analgesia regarding this point. Second thing is about intermittent and this continuous regime. I would like to add one thing. If it is a continuous infusion, it's like a drip irrigation. And often I have seen in few patients that because the local anesthetic solution gets more concentrated on one particular nerve root, and patient develops anesthesia in that particular part, and rest of the pain relief is not there. So my practical feeling is intermittent doses is definitely useful, as Dr. Dilip has already told that it has a uniform distribution and it blocks all the segments. Coming to epidural test dose, why epidural test dose? There is a lot of discussion about epidural test dose, and there are a lot of controversies also whether to use it or not, and often the opinions are divided. First thing is, why epidural test dose is needed? Because though one is sure that your catheter has gone into the epidural space, it may not be so even in the expert hands. Why? It may go intravascular, it may go in the subarachnoid space, and one must recognize where it has gone. So, epidural test dose is necessary to identify whether the catheter has gone in some other space. The purpose of the epidural test dose is that it allows the recognition of abnormal entry into some other space at the same time without any side effects. Because if the drug goes intravascularly, it may produce a local analgesia toxicity. If it goes into the subarachnoid space, it will produce a high or total spinal. The ideal local anesthetic should be such that it should be readily available. It should have a high sensitivity, that it should have a low false negative rates. Then it should have a high specificity. It should have a low false positive incidence. Then, which are the different drugs used for epidural test dose? Lignocaine 1.5% 3 cc with epinephrine 50 micrograms is the recommended dose given in theory. But people have used other doses also, like bupivacaine and ropivacaine also. Ropivacaine is not at all a good test dose because it has a very low motor effect. Xylocaine, personally, I don't use a test dose actually. The same dose, whatever you are giving as a first dose, I divide it into three parts. First, 1/3 of the dose, that is a calculated dose, 1/3 I give through the epidural needle before passage of the catheter. That has advantages, two advantages. One is it dilates the epidural space, and second thing is till the time the catheter is threaded and it is fixed, then we generally know that some effect is there, and I ask the patient whether you are comfortable better than before. The patient generally says yes, some comfort is there. Then I tell them that it is going to take some time, but you are feeling comfortable, so it's okay. And then when the patient lies down, I give the remaining 1/3 dose. Coming to theoretical point, why xylocaine adrenaline? Because the adrenaline, if it goes into the intravascularly, it will produce a tachycardia. So before administering the xylocaine adrenaline dose, one must see that the dose is not injected when the patient is in uterine contractions, because with every uterine contraction there is some rise in the pulse rate. Then after every dose, one has to wait for 3 to 5 minutes for the medicine to act. And a caution should be used in hypertensive patients and patients having uteroplacental insufficiency. I would like to quote one incident when one of my colleagues suddenly called me that she had given an epidural dose, and after 10 minutes BP and everything was alright, but patient stopped moving her legs. She said patient is comfortable, she is speaking nicely, but she can't move her legs at all. So what to do? Please come immediately. So I said, be cool, be ready for hypotension, but which never happened. I reached there and checked and told her to calm down and not become restless. Then I said our primary aim is to give analgesia, which is already there. So we'll just wait. Have you aspirated? So aspiration is not the test to check whether it is a subarachnoid or not, because the space may get collapsed and it may be a false negative test. You may not aspirate CSF all the time. So better to remove the cover of the epidural catheter and let it flow freely on a sterile gauze space. If there is a continuous flow, then you identify that it is in the subarachnoid space. That is one more method. So that was also not there. So it was a subdural placement, which can happen. That is the third thing. So even with a small dose, you can get a dense block. So there comes the role of a epidural test dose.
Yes.
Then every dose is also a test dose, because after a first dose everything is all right, and during the uterine contraction the catheter may migrate sometimes subarachnoid space. So next dose also you have to give a calculated in a different titrated manner, one third like that over the period. So inadvertent intradural injection is avoided. Thank you.
Yes, okay. So you may not actually use the conventional lignocaine adrenaline as the test dose, but yes, test dose is mandatory because we all know migration of the catheter tip is very common in pregnant patients because of the adverse physiological changes. Now, if you go through literature, there are several other test doses other than what we just discussed. Double dose, test dose. This, mind you, is only to confirm the epidural placement. It does not rule out the subarachnoid placement or intravascular placement. As discussed by sir, you give a small aliquot of drug, a diluted drug, and then wait for 3 to 4 minutes and again repeat the dose. If there is onset of sensory block, it confirms epidural placement. What really amused me while I was searching for test dose is the fentanyl test dose. The authors over here hypothesized that if you inject 100 micrograms of fentanyl into the epidural space, and if it is in the intravascular placement accidentally, it will create all the effects like dizziness, drowsiness, sedation, and immediate pain relief, similar to what would happen if it was injected intravascularly. So they compared IV fentanyl versus fentanyl into the epidural catheter. I'm not so sure, but probably they must have ruled out intrathecal placement beforehand, because if you inject 100 micrograms into the epidural catheter, not knowing or not ruling out the intrathecal placement, it is going to be detrimental. So yes, test dose has to be given. Now, till now we all spoke about the classical epidural. But over the years, there have been various modifications. So, Dr. Vineet Gupta, sir, can you please tell us what are the various modifications of lumbar epidural in labor analgesia, please?
There are many known modifications of labor epidurals. Like first is continuous caudal analgesia. Actually, it is first form of regional analgesia used during for the labor anesthesia. But it is not the method of choice nowadays, because one, it requires large amount of local anesthetic. Second, it is difficult to put because of the difficult anatomical site, and the deformities at the sacral or hiatus level are more in comparison to lumbar intervertebral spaces. Then the risk of puncturing and of rectum and fetal parts are more common, because second stage pains are very severe kind of pain, and if we choose this kind of analgesia, patient is moving, screaming in the pain, presenting part is coming down, and if we choose to go with this kind of anesthesia. So particularly for me, I do not prefer this continuous caudal analgesia. Then the second is lumbar epidural analgesia. This is the most common form of epidural analgesia we use, and most of the places this conventional lumbar epidural analgesia is used. It is the bread and butter for all the obstetric anesthetists. If you take a survey, most of them are using this lumbar epidural analgesia. Mode of injections can be different. They may be using intermittent bolus injections, or they may be using continuous infusion. My preferred choice is continuous infusion, but I agree with what Dr. Dilip is said, or Dr. Satish Phadke sir also said, that this preformed intermittent epidural boluses are now taking command over this continuous infusion. The reason, as Dr. Dilip said, is right. When you give epidural dose, bolus epidural dose, you give it with good amount of pressure, and all the three holes, they work together, and there is an even spread of local anesthetic in the epidural space. So that is the reason for the strong effect of it, and patient comfort level. But theoretically, breakthrough pain is the greatest disadvantage of intermittent bolus injections. Continuous infusion of analgesic needed maintenance of a stable level of analgesia. Then it diminishes the risk of maternal hypotension. Then chances of systemic local anesthetic toxicity are less with this continuous infusion. And then satisfactory perineal analgesia. Then comes this, you see, patient-controlled epidural analgesia. This is basically giving command or control to the patient itself, because patient sometimes say, doctors, आप 45 minutes में आ रहे हो, मेरा पेन तो 40 मिनट में आ गया है. You are visiting me, though the unit is well planned, like your LDR and OTs are made together, but still you need some time to reach from your theater to LDR. And by increasing this Google educated society of people are quite intolerant about their pains nowadays. So this is basically giving command to the people itself. So it is less maternal hypotension and motor blocks, and then total amount of local anesthetic used is reduced, and this give a feeling of empowerment and control over own analgesia. So basically, it is helping ourselves also. Sometimes because of lack of manpower, or when manpower is at distress, patient-controlled epidural analgesia comes helpful to us basically. Then comes combined spinal epidural analgesia. This is my bread and butter, my choice of technique, and this I like it, I love it, because it provides rapid, reliable onset of profound analgesia resulting for intrathecal injection. I used to convince my patient, you take your two pains while I am giving my epidurals. By the third time when CTG will be applied, and you will be shown that your uterus is actually contracting, but you are not feeling the pain. This magic is only done by patient control, combined spinal epidural analgesia. And patients are literally smiling by the time you fix your catheters. So this is the wonder of this technique, combined spinal epidural analgesia. The epidural, the second part of combined epidural is this epidural catheter basically. So this provides longer duration analgesia due to epidural administration of local anesthetics. Now the drugs which I give intrathecally. My choice of drug is 25 microgram fentanyl I give as a bolus and intrathecally through the spinal needle, and then I put an epidural catheter and I start infusion right away. I do not wait for the breakthrough pain after that. Though the infusion rate is very less, like ropivacaine 0.1% for 5 cc per hour I start, plus admixture of this fentanyl 2 microgram per ml. But theoretical disadvantages are when you do the dural puncture with combined spinal epidural anesthesia, you actually creating a rent into the dura, and there is a chances of post-dural puncture headache. Fortunately, touch wood, I do not face a lot of problem this PDPH in my practice, so I am well convinced with it. The second disadvantage, what people say, is that you cannot confirm with your epidural position, catheter position. Yes, I agree with all of them. You have to be vigilant in obstetric practice. It is expected that intrathecal dose of your fentanyl, the effect of that will wane off in next 30 minutes or maximum 45 minutes, the effect will start going on. And my point is, because I start my infusion at the time of putting the catheter, I get a good 45 minutes to cover that for the break off point pain, as well as in those 45 minutes, I can check that my infusion dose, whether it is creating motor blockage or whether it is the catheter. Because if that catheter is subarachnoid placement of catheter, of course the patient will be having weakness in the legs by the infusion also. So my epidural dose is actually going into the infusion. I have to be vigilant, which everyone has to, obstetric anesthetists have to be. But then I am convinced with my technique and by the practice and by the experience, I am very comfortable with this technique. Then comes this computer integrated patient controlled epidural analgesia. Basically, it is a patient controlled epidural analgesia, but it is a laptop computer is integrated with your infusion pump, patient controlled analgesia pump. The laptop is it's basically a programmed algorithm is fixed into the laptop, and we start with the fentanyl 15 microgram in intrathecal space plus ropivacaine 2 milligram, and then we give in epidural space 1.5% of lignocaine 2 ml. Though it's not my practice, we are not using it. I'm just explaining you how it is being used. Then we do not start the infusion. We wait for the breakup point. If the pain comes, then we will start infusion for the 5 ml per hour. Then we watch this patient for next 1 hour. If this 5 ml is not enough within one hour, we have to increase the dose to 10 ml per hour. And if it is okay for even more than 1 hour, we have to stop the infusion because we consider it as an overdose. In the reverse, if the pain, even after the starting of this infusion at 5 ml per hour, if patient feels the pain, the computer itself increase the dose to 10 ml per hour for the next cycle. Then this computer assess for the next 1 hour, if patient has the breakthrough pain in that next 1 hour. If the patient feels this breakthrough pain in next 1 hour, within 1 hour, computer automatically increase the dose to 15 ml per hour. And if patient do not feel the breakthrough pain even after passing the 1 hour, the computer take it back to the 5 ml per hour. So this is how this computer integrated patient controlled analgesia goes on. Then comes there was that programmed intermittent epidural boluses. There comes the pumps now. The pumps are basically programmed already, and they give this epidural boluses as they are programmed. Like Dr. Dilip said, that was a manual intermittent this epidural boluses, and this is already through the infusion pump, which is programmed to give this epidural boluses, intermittent boluses. Then comes the walking epidural. Walking epidural is basically, it's a simple epidural, conventional epidural with low dose. It was, the term walking epidural is coined because patient can ambulate. But as you know, any facility or any freedom comes at the cost of some responsibility also. So the advantages of this walking epidural is the freedom of mobility is there, then increased uterine activity and intensity of contractions are there, then decreased pain and duration of first stage of labor, and decreased fetal heart rate abnormalities, and decreased incidence of operative and instrument assisted deliveries. But there are some conditions which is to be assessed before patient is allowed to ambulate. These are reassuring fetal status, then engagement of fetal presenting part is done, stable orthostatic vital signs, Then ability to perform bilateral straight legs rise in bed against the resistance. Then satisfactory walking around accompanied by a nurse or midwife, and then intermittent fetal heart rate monitoring every 15 minutes. Then comes another modification, that is double catheter technique. In this technique, there are first they put epidural catheter in first or second lumbar space to cover the first stage of labor. Followed by there is a caudal epidural catheter, second catheter, during the second stage to cover the pain of the second stage of this labor. This technique is most useful in case in which an extensive sympathectomy must be avoided. Like the indications is very important. You need not to use this technique in every patient. Very important point is use only when it is indicated, particularly in patients of like aortic stenosis or primary pulmonary hypertension. So these are some you can say modifications of epidural analgesia.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. So by now we all are convinced that the most important aspect in lumbar epidural analgesia is the correct placement of the epidural catheter. And over years there have been refinement in the way we approach the epidural space. So just to complete the concept, I would like to show these two pictures. One is of the epidrum and the next is episure. So they are just modifications of our routine conventional epidural needle and the set. For example, in the epidural, you have a diaphragm in between the syringe and the Tuohy's needle, and once the space is reached, the diaphragm would be deflated. Similarly, in episure, there is a spring-loaded syringe which would deflate once the space is reached. Here is a small trivia for you all. You can see this is the conventional Tuohy's needle with certain extension. We don't have the time to actually discuss about this in detail. So this is what is called as the Sui test, and the extension is nothing but the nerve stimulator. The way that we use for peripheral nerve stimulator while giving blocks. Now here, if the needle is in the correct place, that is in the epidural space, you would get the desired motor response. Now responses can also be seen if it is in the subarachnoid space or the subdural space. So how to determine the correct placement? Here is where the current comes into picture. So if it is in the epidural space, a current of 1 to 10 milliamperes is required to actually elicit the motor response. While if it is in the subarachnoid space, response can be seen even with less than 1 milliamperes of current. And if it is in the subdural space with less than 1 milliamperes of current, you would see multiple motor responses. So that is how you can actually confirm the correct placement. Sui et al. Have studied extensively the space, epidural space, and reaching it specifically in laboring patients. There are also many tests by him, like one of them is epidural ECG. We will not be going into detail. Here is yet another trivia for you. You can see these are the graphs displayed. The fourth one is that of the epidural waveform. So, and the other are the conventional waveforms that we see on display. So this is again one of the methods to confirm the epidural placement. The waveform which you get after correct placement is due to the pressure that is transmitted from the dura beneath, and the pressure is obviously going to change as per the space, like it is going to be different in the cervical, lumbar and thoracic space. So that is just to cover about the refinements or the modifications in the LOR or in the confirmation of the epidural catheter placement. Apart from typical epidural analgesia, there are several other modalities in which the central neuraxial block can be used. Dr. Chintan Vyas, can you please elaborate on the other CNB modalities for labor analgesia?
Yeah, there is lumbar epidural is not the only method by which you can give labor analgesia. As sir has already said, CSE can be done. In private practice, we do it with simple, not as CSE set that we used to get. We do it with separate needle and separate lumbar puncture needle and separate set for epidural. And maybe we will choose two different space also, in which I used to do is giving fentanyl intrathecally only, and no local added, and rest dose of local in epidural space only. But I seldomly do it only when there is I need quicker block, then patient is in advanced stage of labor. Then there is another method is a single shot epidural, where you expect that there is 6-7 centimeter dilatation and only vein is there. Obstetricians say that in 1 or 1.5 hour the delivery is going to happen. So if you team obstetric team is confident, we can give only single shot epidural and 20 ml of drug in the epidural space after locating is sufficient. I used to give intrathecal single shot intrathecal local, that is sort of sacral block type, in which I will usually add opioid. I will prefer tramadol also in that, and it is effective in this late stage rescue type of situation, where you expecting delivery to happen within 1 hour. As sir has told that there is a double epidural catheter, he has described it very well, in which sequential activating of upper and lower according to the stage of labor is done. Then there is one interesting thing is dural puncture epidural that is coming up nowadays, in which the intestinal dura is puncture is done after you put the epidural catheter. The intention is to produce a denser and effective block in a patient where you need sure shot effect. No drug is given intrathecally, or you can add maybe some fentanyl or clonidine or something. But usually the drugs in the epidural space seeped through the hole created in dura and produces a denser block. It is very useful when you suspect that head is a bit more and there is borderline CPD kind of thing, where obstetrician feel that he can apply forceps or venous suction and get it delivered. I have done it in fussy patients and this kind of situation where obstetrician is sure enough that vaginal delivery is possible. Uh, so that is also, these are also some modalities. You should not be fixated that only you need to put a lumbar epidural catheter only. You can do this method also.
Yes. Okay, so this is one picture which shows what Dr. Chintan just described. This is one of the best pictures for CNB in labor analgesia, wherein they have compared epidural and DPE versus combined spinal epidural. So in a single picture, you can see the technique, the onset of analgesia, the quality of analgesia, and also the side effects are very well depicted in this picture. Now, at times, it can so happen that the patient is having contraindication to central neuroaxial block, or she may just refuse central neuroaxial block. So, what are the other techniques that can be utilized? Dr. Satish Phadke, could you please tell us other techniques, non-regional, for labor analgesia? What are they?
Even if you are expert in administering epidural labor analgesia, there are incidences where you have to opt for other methods, because sometimes there is a spinal surgery and there is a big scar, or there is a Harrington rod surgery or something like that. Then there is an infection on the back. You cannot administer epidural analgesia. And patients are so educated nowadays that they will say, because the facility of analgesia is there, I have come to this hospital, so administer me some kind of labor analgesia. So you have to go for other pharmacological methods. In the pharmacological methods, there are two types of pharmacology you can use. Either inhalation agents or injectable narcotics. Coming to history, the inhalation agents were used since long times. First incidence was in 1847 when Simpson used ether for a successful labor analgesia. And thereafter, many agents have been tried and used. So the next agent which is commonly used, especially in England, is the Entonox. That is 50-50% mixture of oxygen and nitrous oxide, which gives reasonable labor analgesia. But apart from UK, it is not that popular anywhere in the world. What is Entonox? As I said, it is a 50-50% concentration of ready-made cylinder and apparatus is available. The advantages are the ease of use. Often a physician may not be required for administration of Entonox. Then it has a minimal accumulation when it is disconnected and intermittent use is done, and it can be used by self. The accumulation is very less. The effect comes after 20 to 30 seconds of administration, and the peak effect is when the breathing is done for 45 seconds. The disadvantages are nausea, vomiting. Sometimes the patients become disoriented, and there is a not analgesia is not complete. The next commonly used medicine is the meperidine, that is pethidine. 1 milligram per kg is the intramuscular dose. Again, it is fairly commonly used in UK with good satisfaction rates. Then other narcotic agents, systemic narcotic agents used are morphine, diamorphine, fentanyl, ketamine. But apart from fentanyl and remifentanil, most others have significant side effects because of their lipid solubility and rapid transfer to the fetus. So the maternal side effects are mother can become drowsy, disoriented with a baby delivering which is also drowsy, and you need to tell the neonatologist to be ready. So what do I use nowadays? Because remifentanil is not available here, the fentanyl is the medicine which you can use, and fentanyl is very useful because it is very potent. Its metabolites are not active and it has a significantly longer half-life. There are pumps available. Patient control analgesia is possible with a 20 microgram single dose with a 5-minute lockdown is the most effective regime. If it is not available, you can give 50 micrograms every 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so, depending upon the requirement of analgesia. The best results are found with remifentanil, though it is not available because it is a very ultra short acting and the dose is 0.25 to 0.5 microgram per kg with a 2-minute lockout dose. These are the medicines which are available.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So despite knowing and practicing each and everything about labor analgesia, we still can face problems, and hence discussing the troubleshooting is of paramount importance. My first question is to Dr. Dilip Parmar. How do you salvage a failing epidural? Epidural can fail right from difficulties in sighting the space till actually when you administer the drug, which is presumably to be in epidural but simply fails to act. So how do you salvage a failing epidural?
Why my epidural fails? Let's understand why my epidural failed first. Then we look at the how to salvage it. Now there is a reason is inadequate activation dose and maintenance dose. For effective blockade or effective labor analgesia, one has to administer adequate concentration and adequate volume of local anesthetic along with HU1. Sometimes what happen, the maintenance dose is administered by obstetrician or staff nurse. There might be chances of concentration or volume error, and there should not be desired effect. So anesthetist should visit the patient, and at least anesthetist should top up the next maintenance dose. Incorrect needle or catheter placement, that is possible See, sometimes patient is having a raised BMI, a parturient with a raised BMI. There are sometimes there is a multiple attempt of epidural space location. So there is a chances of subcutaneous placement of epidural catheter. There is a false sense of loss of resistance technique. So there will be no effect, no analgesia, or there will be local tissue swelling. So you have to remove and resite the catheter. Another thing is the catheter can migrate in a subdural space. Subdural space is a potential space. Sometimes in the past I was using a 9-hole rigid catheter that sometimes pierce the dura, and it side at the in a at the subdural space. So when you are giving a local, there is a patchy effect, or there is a delayed or no effect at all. So you have to remove the catheter and reset. Sometimes there is a intrathecal insertion of the catheter. It can happen. So when you are giving when you aspirate, there might be chances of CSF aspiration. When you are giving a test dose, there might be rapid onset of motor blockade, there might be hemodynamic instability, that might be high or total spinal, that might be fetal bradycardia. When there is any inadvertent complication occurs, suppose there is a total spinal arrest, forget everything, just resuscitate the patient. And emergency LSCS is one of the strategy of a CPR in a parturient who had received a labor analgesia, because when you extract the fetus from the womb, it relieves the pressure over the inferior vena cava and enhance the venous return. So it is a part of resuscitation. So always the theater and drum for the cesarean section should always be ready when you are conducting labor analgesia. Once you diagnosis during test dose that the catheter is placed intrathecally, you can use that catheter, as Chintu said. He intentionally do intrathecal placement, intrathecal puncture. So you can use that intrathecal catheter as a low dose continuous spinal analgesia. There is an intravenous placement. Again, the rigid nylon catheter can pierce. There is a engorgement of the veins in an epidural space. So there are chances of venous placement of the epidural catheter. So how can we avoid this venous placement of the catheter? So prefer always lateral position in place of sitting position. Always insert catheter or needle in between the contraction. And when there is a aspiration of the blood through the catheter, just withdraw 1 centimeter the catheter and again check it for blood aspiration. When there is there might be higher chances of lignocaine associates local anesthetic systemic toxicity when you have placed intravascular catheter. There are chances of migration of epidural catheter. If it migrate laterally, there will through the intervertebral foramen, there might be unilateral block. So you have to again withdraw the catheter and administer the local anesthetic dose and look at the bilateral effect of the local anesthetic agent. When it is when it is migrate posteriorly, again in a raised BMI patient, or if catheter is not secured effectively, so there might be chances of subcutaneous or posterior migration of the epidural catheter. There are various catheter fixation devices are available. Remove and reset. Sometimes there is patient as Satish sir said, there is a previous spinal surgery. So this post-operative scarring and obliteration of the epidural space distort the normal anatomy. So it will interfere with the loss of resistance technique, and the spread of local anesthetic solution is not uniform. So you can provide alternative method of labor analgesia to this patient, or even you can administer intrathecal LA opioid to this patient. Next slide. Sacral sparing. Hello. The in a first stage of labor, the pain is at L1. Pain is at T10 to L1. While in the second stage of labor, the pain is at the S2 sacral segment. The nerve root value is a pudendal nerve, that is S2, 3, 4. The pudendal nerve is a thick nerve, and these S2, 3, 4 nerves are distal from the tip of the epidural catheter. So the sacral nerves may not disperse in the local anesthetic solution. So there might be chances of perineural pain during the second stage of the labor due to sacral sparing. One can give a higher volume of top of dose, or one can give intrathecal. One can go for combined spinal and epidural to avoid this sacral sparing. Thank you.
Can I add something?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Please add. Poonam is disconnected. She is just getting connected. You can add.
I'll add one or two points. I think Dr. Dilip has covered almost everything. So the problem of sacral sparing, in the initial stages, the T10 to L1 those are nicely blocked, and patient progresses fast, and you need to block S2, 3, 4. So what are the different things? Previously, we used to give the setting dose, so that hoping that the drug will gravitate and it will block the distinct. But another method which can be used is a high volume, low concentration dose. So 0.0625 or 0.1% or so. Instead of 10 cc, you make it at 20 cc or something like that. So that the spread is more, and hoping that it generally covers the sacral segments also. That is one thing which is possible. Vinit, do you want to add something?
Sir, I want to add something.
Yeah,
Yeah, please.
Yes, please.
Yeah. What I am doing is give 2 ml of lignocaine plain, 2% lignocaine, 2 ml only. It will cover every sparing, and keep patient in sitting position and give the dose. It will gravitate to lower levels also, and 2%, 2 ml is not a more dose to affect any hemodynamics or anything, but it will solve your problem of sacral sparing patchy effect or something. I do it in last stage also, when they need episiotomy. I say to the staff that you don't give any local to the perineum, but just give 3 ml, 2 to 3 ml of 2% Xylocard through the epidural catheter, or if I am there, I will give it 2 or 3 ml of Xylocard, and it will act instantaneously and solve your purpose. That is what I am doing.
What
Okay,
I am doing,
almost.
Satish sir, is when there is a sacral sparing, my practice is, as I told you, combined spinal epidural analgesia with infusion pump. So the infusion pump dose is already going on. So what I do, I take a syringe out of this infusion pump and I inject the same solution, 0.1% ropivacaine plus fentanyl 2 mics per ml, 8 ml of bolus, straight 8 ml of bolus. That covers all the sacral sparing one. The same kind of dosing as Dr. Chintan also said. Only the difference is that the drug as well as the dose. The same I use when there is a problem while stitching this episiotomy. I tell my obstetrician, please don't give local anesthetics. You need not to worry about local anesthetics. I'll take care of it because I have given your patient a labor analgesia. So just don't worry about it. I'll give you the same kind of analgesia through the epidural catheter. So I inject 8 ml of the bolus of this ropivacaine 0.1% plus premixed solution of 0.1% ropivacaine plus fentanyl 2 mics per ml. And that covers everything. That is fantastic. Patient is feeding her baby her episiotomy is being is in the process of suturing by obstetricians. Everyone is happy, but the need of the hour is I have to be there. I cannot run away from the LDR. Thank you.
Poonam, you can move to question.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Please start the slideshow.
yes. Hope it's visible.
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah, I'm sorry for getting disconnected. Okay, so this is done, right?
Yeah.
It is also.
Yes.
Excuse me, that unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, please, yeah. Go ahead, yeah.
Before that, that is a precipitate labor. So sometimes there is in a multiparous patient, there is a precipitated labor, and we don't get enough time to shocking the nerve, and there is no effect. So there might be one of the reason for the failure of labor analgesia. The second is unrealistic patient expectation. See, when we are using the penless words, the penless word itself is a misnomer. I never use that penless words. I always use it as a less pen words. When you are using a penless word, the patient expect that there is a no pen at all. When I am video call with my hubby, there will be delivery, and I am not going to aware about that baby has already delivered. So I have to tell her that baby is delivered when you are talking about aloo parotha to your husband, and we have hand over your kids to your to its mosi. So patient has a always unrealistic expectation. We have to so that's why I am always using less pen labor in place of penless labor. Sometimes there is a low pen threshold, so we need a counseling, reassurance, and if my top up dose is not working, then I add adjuvant to my maintenance dose. I am a fond of fentanyl, so I use fentanyl to enhance the efficacy of my labored dose regimen. Next.
Okay. Thank you so much. Often it happens that you are called late for giving labor analgesia. So, Dr. Chintan Vyas, what do you do if you are called late in the labor for labor analgesia?
Oh, this is the problem with me what I can say is two of my centers have started after that only. That sir, please come, and patient is not cooperating now, fully dilated. What do something to decrease the pain? So I have just vocally told them that just call me once if this kind of situation arises. What I used to do is give sacral block type of thing. In that intrathecally, I will inject 3 ml, 2.5 to 3 ml of 0.2% ropivacaine straight. So it will be done in within 1 minute. So even if patient is screaming in pain, she can have instantaneous relief. Also, you can do CSE. After that, you can put a epidural catheter. But I think it will be overdone because delivery is going to happen in within few minutes or maybe in half an hour. Then you can do a single shot epidural injection also in this situation. But I think it will be a challenging thing. But surely you can spare a catheter for that. You don't need catheter to put catheter inside when delivery is going to happen, and you don't want any catheter to be left over for staff to handle. Then there is also you can give intrathecally small dose of fentanyl or ketamine, preservative free. But I think I have done once only this thing, and then also if at all patient is screaming and all that, you can always give IV drugs like ketamine, fentanyl, remifentanil. I have done a few times combo of two methods. Like patient was screaming and I gave IV ketamine small dose 25 mg and lateralize and give single shot spinal LA. So it worked. Also in this I will like to say that if at all cesarean delivery is needed, you can still deliver in this 3 ml 0.2% ropivacaine very easily. You can conduct cesarean section without any other GA supplementation or all. I have done it almost 3, 4, 5 times probably. And also you can have Antonox cylinder. You can give inhalation of that, but I don't think we have it in India. So these are the modalities if you are called very late, like almost fully dilated, and patient screaming in pain. Also you can the all anesthesiologists should take home message that uh, you can provide analgesia at any stage, be it first, second, very late, last. Open your mind first, then you can be able to convert your convince and convert your non convinced gynecologist friends for the this liver analgesia part.
Yeah,
That's it,
true.
madam.
True, true. So painless labor or less pain labor is right of parturient, I must say. So talking about troubleshooting and not mentioning ultrasound is not possible in today's world. Dr. Vineet Gupta, sir, what is the role of ultrasound in labor analgesia?
Ultrasound is still considered a luxury even in the UK, particularly for the poor class anesthetist. There was a recent survey done in UK, where they found that dedicated ultrasound machine for the anesthetist use was present less than half of the units.
Sir.
And most of the time, like 56%, this machine was used to give the tap blocks, 52% for the vascular access, and only 22% patient they use this machine to find out this lumbar epidural space, or to check the sonoanatomy of the spine. Yes, it improves the accuracy of the desired level. Yes, reduce the number of the events. Yes, it reduced the number of failed procedures. Yes, it improved the catheter function. Yes, it reduced the resite rate. Then reduction in PDPH is even noted. I don't know how it is noted, probably by excluding this inadvertent this dural puncture by exactly knowing the epidural space, and this might be the reason. And then there is a particular role in basically of this obese or scoliotic patients. So see, there is a huge problem between this scoliotic patients and this obese patient. When they get pregnant, their the spinal anatomy or sonoanatomy is complete. I mean, anatomy of their sacral spine or lumbar spine is completely changed. You don't get any space. There is lot of fat, and then there might be a patient of this preeclampsia or pregnancy-induced hypertension with edema on their back. These kind of patient, yes, ultrasound has a great benefit. And then it has been demonstrated that when epidural anesthesia is performed by anesthetist who is expert in ultrasound as well as conventional method, particularly if these patients are non-obese patients or non-scoliotic patients, there is no difference between the result even if they use ultrasound machine. But their particular role is for this patient who are obese, who have this lot of edema on their back, who are scoliotic, or who have this some kind of spinous deformity. Yes, ultrasound machine is a great benefit for all of us. Then the first attempt success rate is 92% when we use ultrasound machine in obese patient, as compared to 44% only when we don't use it. The only problem is financial constraint for the availability of ultrasound machine in LDR. LDR, because they are sharing basically ultrasound machine between 2 or 3 LDRs. So every time even you do not get the machine, and when you don't get the machine, you are not practiced about it. When you are not practiced about it, you are less confident when actually you needed it. So basically, if ultrasound machine is available, use it. If not available, please read it and try to convince your hospital authorities as well as your obstetricians colleagues that it will actually increase the chances of success. Thank you.
Yes. Yes, this can be something which can be used in future. As you can see, it is an ultrasound probe which can be incorporated into the epidural needle to actually give you a real-time vision of these structures. Next question is to Dr. Satish Phadke, sir. How do you convert the labor analgesia to anesthesia for cesarean section?
Your epidural analgesia is nicely working, patient is progressing, and there are obstetric reasons where they have to interfere and convert it to for cesarean section. The easiest method, the advantage of epidural is already it is cited. You have to just change the analgesic dose to anesthetic dose. There are different regimes and various combinations of medicines have been used for conversion for anesthesia for cesarean section. But the most popular and gold standard is 2% lignocaine with adrenaline, 15 cc, with or without soda bicarb. What I do, it has been found that lignocaine alone 2% without adrenaline, the potency of quality of anesthesia is not that good. Maybe because of the adrenaline which has alpha adrenergic blocker action, so it has been found to give a better action. 3% 2-chloroprocaine has been used significantly, which gives rapid action and potent action, but it is of short duration, and there are reports that some neurological sequelae were noted, maybe because of the preservative, and the incidence of hypotension is more using 2-chloroprocaine. I don't have any experience of 2-chloroprocaine. And it also reduces the efficacy of subsequent analgesia of morphine. So what I use is lignocaine 2% with adrenaline 15 ml. When you know about your obstetrician, depending on when he is going to come and when he is going to start the cesarean section, accordingly I decide whether to use the soda bicarb or not. Sometimes they need to do very fast. At that time, soda bicarb helps in minimizing the onset of action. If the operating room is adjacent, still they take some time for shifting the patient from labor room to operation room. So if there is some time, I very well give 5 cc of the 2% xylocaine adrenaline dose in the labor room itself. And then when the patient is shifted, immediately I give the remaining 10 ml dose so that the action comes faster. The advantage of giving 2% 5 ml beforehand is that by the time you go in the operating room, there is some amount of anesthesia and patient starts feeling numbness of the legs, and you are sure that your epidural is working properly, and the subsequent 10 cc will give the complete anesthesia. And if the surgeon is in OPD and he says, I am coming, you give the epidural and start painting on something, and you think that the surgeon might take more time, I don't use soda bicarb at all, because this happens. They tend to come even if there is a fetal heart rate changes, they come little late. So if the soda bicarb is used and there is a dense action, sometimes there is hypotension and the surgeon doesn't start immediately. At that time, I don't add soda bicarb. These are the few minor changes which I use. And if the action is not there, they have painted and draped, you might have to add some 5 cc subsequent additional dose. Sometimes, if the last 2 doses, last 2 doses of epidural, the action is not adequate, you think the doses requirement is too frequent, then you are doubtful about the exact placement or dislodgement of catheter somewhere, or maybe only few holes are there, then you must have a low threshold, and you must, I might have to convert to spinal anesthesia instead of continuing with the because that avoids the GA. That is very rarely happens, but theoretically this can happen. So I have never required a GA or something, very rarely, if you are sure about your catheter placement. If there is no adequate action, you straight away you have to go for general anesthesia. These are the various things I do.
Yes. Yes, sir. I would like to ask all the panelists how do they create awareness of labor analgesia amongst the obstetricians as well as the patients. Can they please share the patient information sheet with us? So this is Dr. Satish Phadke sir's patient information sheet. Please sir, tell us about this.
Repeat the question.
Dr. Poonam, please repeat the question. I think Dr. Bharke has not got this your question.
Yeah.
Yes,
I was
yes,
mute.
yes. This is
I was mute.
This is Dr. Phadke sir's patient information sheet. Can you sir please elaborate on this?
Yeah. Am I audible now? I was not
Yes,
audible probably.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, Howdy, yes.
We have formed a group about 15 years back called as a SMART group. This is Service of Maternal Analgesia using regional techniques. This is acronym SMART. We came together for this service and we used to offer this service all over Pune, and depending upon the area of the hospital who demands labor analgesia, the anesthetist which is close by or who can go faster in that hospital used to go there, and the anesthetist has a call thereafter. Once the patient is settled, he used to call another group member to take over. In that way, we used to cover many hospitals this way because there were 15 anesthetists. This way, we started conducting labor analgesia and it progressed fast. The times have changed now, and we have prepared these brochures telling about how we do and what are the things, side effects, and all other things, especially mentioning the headache as the only complication. So nowadays, whenever a patient starts asking about complication, we need to tell only about the headache, and I tell as a general statement that in last 15-20 years, apart from headache, I have not seen any complication. Then the patient and the relative becomes comfortable, because after reading the consent, many a times they are afraid of taking it, and there can be incidences where there is confrontation. So these are the things you can tell.
Right. This is what Dr. Chintan Vyas has shared with us. Can you please tell us about this?
Yeah, this is plain in Gujarati, common myths and its remedies, simple explanations. I used to give this to the gynec hospitals, and they will put in the case sheets, files, and the patient used to phone me. I have given my phone number. They used to phone me, and I used to explain them. I also am running the pain clinic where I invite any such patients and their relatives if they need counseling. I have told the obstetricians that you feel free to send your antenatal patients to my clinic. I will explain them and prepare from my part, apart from your efforts.
Right.
So this can be done to propagate your labor analgesia.
Yes, exactly. Little
Thank you.
efforts from our side are required to actually propagate labor analgesia in the general public. So, as our theme mentioned past, present, and future, a little bit of what lies ahead. As Dr. Vinit Gupta mentioned about the CIPCEA, that is Computer Integrated Patient Controlled Epidural Analgesia, this is how it would look like. And this is a programmed intermittent epidural bolus technique that also Vinit sir had mentioned in his talk. This is how it would look like. And this is the CVOX machine. It looks similar to OMV, that is Oxford Miniature Vaporizer. So here it is a specially designed equipment to deliver sevoflurane in oxygen 0.8%, and this can be taken by the patient on her wish, or it can be given continuously. Now, what actually is the future for us is the virtual reality, which has established its place in acute as well as chronic pain, and soon it will be applicable for labor analgesia too. In abroad, it has already been utilized for labor analgesia. So basically, it distracts the patient from the pain, it acts on the neuromatrix, and the patient is distracted so much that she does not feel the pain. So it will be good to see how it actually works in our population. So with that, I conclude the panel discussion. I know it was a very extensive topic with lot many things to be discussed, but I hope we all have done justice to the topic. Even if the topic is closed here, you can still write your queries on the comment section, and the discussion would continue in the task group on Facebook. I would like to conclude with what Moir had said long back in 1979. The delivery of the infant into the arms of a conscious and pain-free mother is one of the most exciting and rewarding moments in medicine. Thank you everyone for your patient hearing. Thank you all the panelists, and at the outset I would like to thank Dr. Hetal sir and Taz for letting us conduct this panel discussion on a very important topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, audience. Thank you, Dr. Hetal.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, my co-panelists.
Thank you
Thank
everyone.
you, sir. Have a good night.